Good morning. I'm Will Goodwin, and I want to welcome you to this morning's VoteVets Live with Congressman Joe Cunningham of South Carolina's 1st Congressional District. We're going to have a great conversation about protecting our nation's public lands and why it matters so much for veterans and military families across America. You know, when people think about how policy affects veterans, they're often rightfully focused on preserving a strong Department of Veterans Affairs and ensuring that the military does right by our men and women in uniform. But of course, we know, and so many of you watching know as well, that veterans are affected by those issues and many more. That's why for several years now, VoteVets and our C3, the Vet Voice Foundation, have brought veteran voices to the halls of Congress to advocate for programs to protect public lands, like the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which was created in 1964 to provide money to protect national parks, areas around rivers and lakes, national forests, and national wildlife spaces from development, and to provide matching grants for state and local parks and recreation projects. We've come to know from research in recent years that the outdoor recreation economy and outdoor recreational activity come with significant health benefits. And for veterans who are working to overcome challenges associated with their service, including physical and mental health challenges, spending time outdoors can be key to that rehabilitation. To talk more about that connection, I want to bring in South Carolina Congressman Joe Cunningham. Congressman Cunningham is serving in his first term in the House and is a member of both the House Veterans Affairs Committee and the House Natural Resources Committee. And important to note, the first district has the highest amount of veterans in the state of South Carolina. And prior to his election, Congressman Cunningham was an attorney and an ocean engineer, and in Congress, his priorities include reinstating the ban on offshore drilling off the Atlantic coast. Congressman, good morning, and thank you for being here with us.
Hey, good morning, Will. It's an honor. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I want to start with a few prepared questions from us and then turn to some questions that have been submitted by veterans from across the country. And for those of you who are watching this live, you can ask your questions for the Congressman by just leaving a comment on whichever social media feed you're using to watch. So we'll go ahead and get started. Congressman, you're the lead sponsor of a piece of legislation called the Great American Outdoors Act, which would provide finally permanent full funding to the Land and Water Conservation Fund. And it also includes the Restore Our Parks and Public Lands Act. Both are bipartisan, they're really important programs. Could you talk a little bit about the Great American Outdoors Act and what funding for both LWCF and ROPA would mean for the American public?
Yeah, of course, Will. And this is an incredible occasion, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to everyone about LWCF and ROPA and why it's important for South Carolina. Even if folks aren't aware of the role it actually plays in their daily lives, because the chances are you and your family have been to some park or visited a green space that has benefited from funding from LWCF in the past. In fact, every single one of South Carolina's 46 counties has benefited from this program, and actually none more so than those counties here in the Low Country. If you've been to Cape Romaine National Wildlife Refuge or Hunting Island State Park or Ace Basin, or even some of the smaller projects like been the Folly Beach Pier, Charleston Waterfront Park, Pitt Street Bridge. These are all areas that have benefited from the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which acquires and maintains green spaces. But I think during this pandemic, Will, and to combat mental health issues even outside this pandemic, the need to be outside and be connected with nature and to have time to reflect is incredibly important for people's mental health, and these green spaces allow that. And so, one of the big reasons people live in South Carolina, live in the Low Country, is because of our beautiful nature and our wildlife and our natural resources. So, what this does is it's being hailed as one of the biggest environmental pieces of legislation in decades. And it's important to remember that the Great American Outdoors Act has already passed the Senate with overwhelming support. I think almost 3/4 of the Senate voted in favor of it. And the president has indicated he's willing to sign this into law. So it's an honor for me to have introduced this in the House and to be leading the charge on that. But also, in addition to being great for veterans and everyone else, it's also great for our economy too. Look, The outdoor recreation industry generates $16.3 billion annually in consumer spending in South Carolina, and it supports over 150,000 jobs in our state. So it's a big economic driver. And so there's just so many wins in this program, and in this piece of legislation. We're just thrilled to be able to hopefully bring this across the finish line by the end of the month.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. The momentum is all there. And we're encouraging people, especially those who are watching, to make sure to call your members of the House and tell them to keep
Mm-hmm.
the momentum going and support the congressman in those efforts. And Congressman, we noted earlier, you're on both the Veterans Affairs Committee and the House Natural Resources Committee. So it's kind of the perfect background to come at this conversation when it comes to veterans and public lands. We've been really involved in this issue and supporting LWCF because in recent years, veteran advocates, and health professionals have started to find that connection between spending time outdoors and helping veterans overcome challenges. For some, post-traumatic stress related to their service. For others, maybe it's a physical injury that they're helping to rehabilitate. How do you see that connection, and how does your work from the Veterans Affairs side play into your support for public lands?
I mean, that's a great question, and it's an important point to drive home. What many folks like yourself have found is that the sort of programs LWCF supports can help ease veterans' transition to civilian life. I talked to a lot of veterans who, they look for. I mean, the thing about the military service is it creates that bond and that kinship, and when people transition back to civilian life, sometimes that can be lost, and so. That's why you have veterans that band together. They go to the shooting range, or they go hunting, or they go enjoy the outdoors. This just provides them another opportunity to do that. And America's public lands offer a restorative space for our men and women who have served. And in the Low Country, I've worked with an incredible veterans organization called the Warrior Surf Foundation, which is founded on Folly Beach, and they help veterans and their families address post-service transition challenges through surf therapy. And there's, we could go on and on about the different groups that help veterans transition to the civilian world while also maintaining that camaraderie and that unit mentality. But I've been inspired by the activism of Wounded Nature Working Veterans, a veterans group that goes out and helps clean up and restore coastal areas. And so I think through the Great American Outdoors Act and through this legislation, it will just open up more spaces and allow more groups like that to flourish.
Absolutely. And, as a follow up to that, we talked a little bit about, you hit on it. This is an economic issue for a whole lot of people across the country, veterans included. People may not know tens of thousands of veterans work for the Park Service or, own small businesses in the outdoor recreation economy. And especially for the federal jobs around public lands, often make a great transition for veterans when they leave the service and want to continue serving the government in a different capacity. But could you talk a little bit more about that economic impact at the lowest level when it comes to passing the Great American Outdoors Act, and what that would mean for veterans who are working in the outdoor recreation economy?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think I stated some of the numbers earlier, but if you look at the number of jobs in our state that are supported through this, it's about 151,000 jobs, and it produces like over $1 billion annually in state and local tax revenue. And this is all generated from consumer spending in the outdoor recreation industry. You look at the number of people who go out and hunt or fish or watch wildlife, and the U.S. Census reports that there's like over 890,000 people who engage in those activities in South Carolina alone. And they spend literally billions of dollars on wildlife related recreation. So you look at not only the tax dollars it generates that go back into helping our communities, but you look at all the other ancillary businesses that support these, and whether it be the kayaking place, or the tour guides, or all the other businesses and jobs that this supports, is it's hard to tabulate, but we've got some of those numbers from census reports or from local reports that I think just understate the importance that this has in our economy.
Sure. And I think we also can't separate this discussion, the importance of being outdoors, from what's happening in the country right now, especially with the
Mhm.
pandemic. Actually, one of the last things that I did before we kind of locked down was enjoy some great seafood down in Charleston when the primaries were still going on. Obviously, we can't do a lot of those same things that we used to, so people are turning to the outdoors. They're spending time with their families, going on hikes or spending time kayaking or whatever it is. Could you talk a little bit about how you think the pandemic is reminding folks of what public lands mean to this country?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that families across the low country have turned to our public lands and our green spaces to help cope through this pandemic because, we're all aware of the mental health issues in the world of veterans, whether it be through PTSD or through service or otherwise. And we've on the Veterans Affairs Committee, we've always strived to find resources for our veterans to help cope with these issues. Now, I think this pandemic has gotten people kind of just closed into their own homes, and a lot of people are feeling the need to be outside and feel reconnected with nature. I know that whenever um, I was quarantined after when I had the coronavirus, I was quarantined for like 2 weeks, and I was just itching to get outside, even just a bike ride around the block. But with things closed and with the importance of social distancing, we're not left with a lot of options on how to get out and stimulate our mental health. But green spaces, parks, beaches, waterways, these are our God-given resources that allow us to cope with everything that's going on. And so, Will, I honestly don't think there's been a more appropriate time for this legislation and a more suitable time in dealing with this.
Absolutely. And we're going to turn to a couple of questions submitted by veterans about this issue in public lands. Before we do, I want to talk more broadly about your work on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. We had Chairman Takano on VoteVets Live a couple of weeks ago to talk about the work that he's focused on with respect to LGBTQ veterans and making sure that they have all of the resources that they earn from their service. What are some of the other focal points for you as you approach the Veterans Affairs Committee assignment?
Well, Will, like you mentioned at the beginning, our district has the most number of veterans of any district in the state of South Carolina. So that's why this committee is so important. The work that it does is so important to me. And, I'm honored to have my name on a number of bills that passed the House and a lot that passed the Senate as well. One recently, just a few months ago, that the president signed into law was my bill called the VA Telehearing Modernization Act. And what it does is it allows veterans to appeal remotely, any claims they have in front of the Veterans Board of Appeals through, a link like this or Zoom or Skype, instead of having to drive to either Columbia or down to Savannah. Um, I I did a ride along with the VA hospital. Actually, some volunteers work for the VA hospital a few months back, picking up veterans and bringing them to their medical appointments downtown Charleston, and just amazed to the the number of veterans without access to a vehicle or family or friends with a vehicle that depend on folks to travel. And so, that just got me thinking, like, what other necessary appointments are there where a veteran might be restricted through lack of travel? And so that's kind of how this thing got started. And even now, so with the use of technology becoming more and more prominent, i.e., today and in this discussion, um, this just allows veterans one more comfort, I guess, and removes one more barrier in their way between getting their claims and getting their benefits. So, when we're proud that the president signed that in law, but that's just one of the recent victories that we're incredibly proud of.
That's great. No, I think it's always that question of access to care and making sure that there are as few obstacles in the way of a veteran getting that rating, getting in to see a provider, and making sure that the VA has what it needs to deliver that care to them. So that's really important. And I know everyone watching is going to appreciate hearing that and appreciates your leadership uh, on the committee. Now, I want to turn to a couple questions submitted by veterans. The first one is about South Carolina. You talked a little bit about it earlier, but the question is, South Carolina is home to a lot of veterans. This veteran is wondering how that population has shaped your work on public lands. And you talked about what the Great American Outdoors Act would mean for South Carolina as a whole. How do you see it helping particularly those communities around some of your military installations or places where veterans call home?
Well, providing them with access to public lands, green spaces, again, all to benefit people's mental health, and also to join other like-minded groups that may reinforce that kind of unit mentality that a lot of veterans come out of the service with as they transition to civilian world. But it's important to note that Secretary Bernhardt and the Interior Department support my bill, the Great American Outdoors Act, and have been encouraging members of Congress to do the same. I'm proud to have found common ground on this because the work that I do in Congress is such a big part of it is bipartisanship and bringing people together. That's why I'm the most bipartisan freshman member in Congress. That's why I've gotten awards from the Chamber of Commerce on this. But this Great American Outdoors Act is another, is another notch in the belt as to bring in Democrats and Republicans together. So I'm proud to be able to champion this, but even more so that it's going to benefit our men and women in uniform and those who have served.
Absolutely, and I think you're right. It's bipartisan, but it's also one of those things that for years has waited to see this moment and to finally come to law fully funded. And it's great that you and others have been able to kind of capture this moment and really bring it to the finish line. The second questioner wants to ask what the VA, the Department of Veterans Affairs, should be doing to promote public lands and tell people about the benefits of getting outdoors, or is there somewhere else in the government that should be doing this?
I think it's incumbent upon everybody to be pushing and advertising like what benefits this offers. And yeah, I feel that when I talk to a lot of veterans who are going through problems just coming out of service, it's their biggest frustration is that doctors just want to push a bunch of medication in front of them. I think that this should be at the forefront of the discussion as to working through any mental health issues and being out in nature, and whether it be hunting or fishing or wildlife observation, just those things to help clear your mind. And I think it should be a cornerstone of our mental health discussion, though. Especially during this time that we're going through with this pandemic. I think it's important for everyone, but even more so with veterans who go through some of these issues on a whole nother level.
Absolutely. All right, Congressman Cunningham, thank you so much for your time and for your leadership on this issue. It means a lot to us as an organization. It means a lot to our members, veterans, and military families across the country. Any final thoughts or things you'd like to get out there before we wrap up?
No, I just want to encourage everyone to contact Congress and let them know to support this bill, to co-sponsor it, to vote for it. We're hoping to bring this across the finish line later this month, and we're going to continue fighting for any and all resources we can for our veterans. Supporting our troops shouldn't just be a tagline in campaigns. It should be something that's carried on from the battlefield to off the battlefield. And I find that oftentimes when I speak to veterans and visit facilities, that a lot of people feel like they've been left behind once they get back and transition to civilian world. So this is just one more step in the process of showing our appreciation and giving veterans the resources they need in order to lead successful civilian lives post-service. So I want to thank everyone who's watching. I want to thank them for their service, what they've done for this great country and making it the best in the entire world. Will, thank you again for having me on here. It's an honor to be a part of this discussion, and look forward to continuing my work to benefit veterans.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Congressman Joe Cunningham of South Carolina's 1st District. And thanks to all of you at home for watching today. We're going to keep going, keep this work going to make sure that we see the Great American Outdoors Act pass the House and get signed into law by the president. Keep calling your members of Congress. Tell them that you want to see this important piece of legislation become law. Thanks for everything that you do. We'll see you very soon here at VoteVets Live. Have a great day.